Welcome to Line Upon Line, a Hebrew Bible study for Come Follow Me. In this series here at Covenant Origins, we'll read the Old Testament in its original Hebrew, taking it line upon line and verse by verse, working through the grammar, vocabulary, and structure of these ancient texts together. I'm learning Biblical Hebrew right alongside you, and I'm joined by friends and scholars who are trained in the Biblical Hebrew and in the Hebrew Bible, helping guide us through the linguistic, historical, and cultural context behind these fascinating scriptures. Our goal is simple: to make the Hebrew Bible more accessible, more meaningful, and more alive, especially for Latter day Saints studying the Old Testament this year. Thank you for joining us. Let's begin. Well, I do appreciate you guys taking the time to be here. I know, Peyton, it's your birthday. You could be doing a whole lot of other things. But
Honestly, this is what I want to be doing.
Peyton, David, maybe just take a minute here at the top and kind of introduce yourselves and your interest in Hebrew language and maybe kind of what you guys are studying right now. Go ahead, Peyton.
Oh, yeah. So my name's Peyton Brown. I'm an undergrad in Ancient Near Eastern Studies at BYU Provo, and I really love Hebrew just because it gets me at the text of the Old Testament, where I can just get deeper into the layers and try and uncover meaning. And it also helps me as I kind of pivot a little bit into other ancient cultures that I'm starting to be interested in. I just took Ugaritic, which was a lot of fun, hoping to take Akkadian, and just languages really interest me right now.
Cool.
Well, I'm David. Nice to meet y'all. I am an undergrad in history in BYU, Idaho. Hopefully, to transfer to Provo soon to do ancient Eastern studies as well. Um, I first got interested in Hebrew while I was on my mission. There were a few scholars in the church who were really inspirational to me, and they emphasized the importance of and the meaningfulness of the languages. And so I've taken 2 semesters, which is all they offer here at Idaho. I'm currently tutoring as well. I just love it. I get to spend 15 plus hours a week tutoring students with Hebrew, and it's just great.
Awesome. And for anybody who's watching this, you might recognize David for his brief appearance in a video with Ben Spackman and Alan Hansen, who you all know as a friend of the channel, in a recent video on Fair on their YouTube channel. And I'll make sure that when I post this, I'll have a link to that video in the description for this video too, as well, so you can check that out. But that was a really excellent discussion that you guys had just on about the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, and maybe some pitfalls to avoid, some interesting sort of tidbits of how to get the most out of our study this year and Come Follow Me. And with all that said, tonight we're going to be talking about Genesis 2 and 3. We're going to do our reading in there. And for anybody who's seen the first episode, you know how this goes. But if you don't, the way that this show works is we take a chapter or two of the Come Follow Me curriculum. We will read select passages from that reading. We'll parse it out. We'll offer a translation. We'll do our best to talk about what's going on with the Hebrew language, all in the hopes that it informs us better of what's going on in the text. So we're going to talk about the text itself for sure, but we also want to get that language component in there as well. So for anybody who is at home who's learning biblical Hebrew or who would like to learn biblical Hebrew, hopefully this serves as a sort of supplementary resource for you on your journey into that world. And so, with all that said, guys, we are doing Genesis 2 and 3 tonight, and we're going to notice some interesting things happening that are a little bit different than our creation account that we find in Genesis 1. For those watching at home, if you haven't seen our first video with Alan Hansen talking about Genesis 1, please go watch that. I'll have a link in the description below for that. But we're going to notice some differences. In your guys' study, have you come across some information or anything interesting about the differences between Genesis 1, what's kind of colloquially called the priestly creation account, and the quote unquote non-priestly account, or in past years it might have been called the Yahwist or the J account, in chapter 2 and 3. What's been your experience learning about the differences there?
Yeah. Well, one thing that sticks out to me because earlier last year I tried to read a lot of books on anthropomorphisms, just the portrayal of God as human-like in form and also function, is that when I move over to Genesis 2 verses 4 until the end of 3, God is very explicitly human. He's not physically any less human in the priestly creation, but he's acting more human. He's down in the dirt. He's forming Adam and Eve and shaping out the land. Whereas in the priestly creation, he's a little bit more transcendent. He's creating by fiat. Um, and I see that as probably conveying something a little different and a little bit more personal as it moves into more of a narrative rather than the kind of temple text that Genesis 1 is emulating.
Yeah, I'll just add to that too. There's a lot of style differences between our two authors here, right? So, whereas Genesis 1 is very like formal and structured and repetitious and things like that, Genesis 2 is much more like free-flowing narrative prose, where you're just kind of going along with the story. You got independent and dependent clauses kind of just thrown around there everywhere. So the style seems really different there. Also, like the perspective is different too. So whereas Genesis 1 is like top down, it's where God is looking over everything, begins with the heavens, and then it goes all the way down and hones in on humanity. Genesis 2 is more like bottom up, where he starts with man and begins with man, and then he creates the grass of the field, and then he creates the animals, and then he creates Eve, right? So it's kind of expanding the perspective there. So they seem to have different styles and different emphases there, which is very interesting.
Yeah, and I see a couple things too, to Peyton's point. So we do see uh, the idea that God is maybe in human form or human-like form, he's anthropomorphic, is kind of in the background. It's more implicit. We don't see anything directly stating that, except for, I think, when we get to verses 26 through 28, and we have humanity created in the image and likeness of God. And this is the Tselem and the Mut that Alan and I talked about last time. And so you could infer that God must look like man because man looks like God. But we don't have anything explicitly anthropomorphic in the description of God. We don't really get much of a description of God in that account. Whereas, like you said, Peyton, we see explicit references to human-like or anthropomorphic-like figures or characteristics for God in the non-priestly account here in 2 and 3. I also see, to your point, David, the style is very different. As you mentioned before, the priestly account's very organized, very structured. We call it a priestly account because it functions as a sort of liturgy almost, which ends with the seventh day and God rests on his throne in the temple and goes to work as sort of the CEO of a vast organization, right? To use Ben Spackman's sort of analogy. Whereas in 2 and 3, we take a more scenic route through creation, and we see kind of more down in the dirt, boots on the ground, what's going on. And we don't have it so neatly structured in quite the same order or in quite the same way as chapter 1 is. Though we see many of the same elements are present, they're written about very differently and with a different focus. And it almost seems to, I think a lot of scholars would say the 2 and 3 account probably serves more as an etiology for why things are the way that they are. Both with humanity and our surroundings in the environment. So, with all that said, why don't we actually jump into the text? So, Alan and I read all the way through to chapter 2 and even the first few verses, finishing out the priestly Genesis account. or creation account. So we're actually going to start a few verses down in verse 4. And I'm going to start. I'll go ahead and start us off. I'll read just a couple verses here. I'm going to start here. If you guys can see that highlighted word, this is where I'm starting. So this is traditionally the beginning of the second creation account that we're going to be going with here. And I'm not going to read super quick, as you guys will see. I'll take my time a little bit and work through it as we go. So if you guys are ready at home, let's do it. So this is Beyom Asot Yahweh Elohim Eretz Veshamayim Vechol. So this is Siach, and remember, this is our furtive patach. So you actually pronounce this patach before the hate at the end there. And this is Hasadeh Terem Yahweh Ba'aretz Vechol Esev Hasadeh. We'll see this word a number of times. Serem Yitzmach Ki Lo Himtir Yahweh Elohim Al Haaretz Be'adam Ein La'avod Et Ha'adamah. Okay, so that's essentially verse 4, the second half of verse 4 through verse 5 here. And I'm going to just highlight a couple things. You guys will remember at home when Alan and I were talking, this bait at the beginning is often a preposition. So this is in something. And yom here is day. So this is in the day that Yahweh Elohim made. And here we have asot. This is a plural for asa. So in the day that Yahweh Elohim made the earth and the heavens. So we're starting a new creation account. We're kind of starting over here. And then verse 5 here. So we have V'chol, Shiach, Hasadeh. This is so in any plant of the field, Terem before Yahweh. Excuse me. Terem Yehyeh. So this is before in the earth, Ba'aretz. Right here. V'chol Esev. So Esev, this is herb. So, and if you're reading along side by side with English, that you're going to see Hasadeh and Esev and these terms quite a lot in these early chapters here. These are herbs, plants, Hasadeh, the field. So you're going to see them quite often. So you'll recognize them pretty quickly. Going back to the herb of the field before had grown for Yahweh had not caused it to rain, Yahweh Elohim, on the earth, and man was not to cultivate the ground. That's going to be the best of my ability here. Anything from you guys on that? How did that look?
Yeah, that seems good to me. Yeah.
Cool. When do you guys want to take the next few verses? We'll see how maybe how quickly we can kind of get through the next few. I feel like I bogged us down just now, so maybe one of you guys want to pick it up for us.
No, that's fine. Do we want to do a couple more verses and then talk about the content?
Yeah, let's do maybe let's get through verse 10 and then we'll stop and we'll talk about the content for a minute.
Okay, I can pick it up if you'd like.
Cool, sounds good.
Okay, verse 6.
Yeah.
Ve'ed ya'alech min haaretz vehi vehishka et la kal pene ha'adama. So translation of that would probably be, and a mist went up from the ground, and the verb is irrigated all the face of the land. Or no, all Adamat, the earth. Yeah, or dirt.
Yeah, sounds good to me. Irrigated, yeah, I would have said watered, but same thing. But I'm just going off of my side screen over here. But
No,
yeah,
yeah, water totally works. Yeah. So Vaye Yetzer um, Yeh Yahweh Elohim et Ha'adam Afar Min Ha'adama Vaye Vaye Pak Be'a Pain Nishmat Chayam Hayam Vaye Vayehi Ha'adam Lip Lene Pesh Chaya. And then Vayita Yahweh Elohim Gan Be'eden Mikdem Vaya Sem Sham Et Ha-Adam Asher Yatzar. And verse 9. Vayetzimach Yahweh Elohim Min Ha-Adama Kal Etz Nech Mad Nechmad Lema La Le'em Re'eh Lema Re'eh Ve'tov Lema'akal Ve'etz Ha'chayim Betok Hagan Ve'et Hadamat Hadaat Tov Varatz. Okay. I guess going slowly from 7. So, and is it all right if I do a translation now?
yeah, go for it. And if you see anything as you're translating that you want to highlight for the audience, whatever little rules or things about the text that make it simpler for people to see things as they read, whatever floats your boat.
Okay. Yeah. See, it looks like verse 6 is kind of a part of a kind of way that started in the middle of verse 5. It's kind of describing the state of creation again. So it goes, so yeah, yeah, that was verse 6. So verse 7 then is continuing. So, and Yahweh Elohim formed mankind um, from the dust of the ground, and uh, he breathed probably with his nose, um, the
Yeah, so this is going
breath.
to be into, so
Oh,
into his
breathe
nose,
into.
into his nostrils.
Okay, thank you. Oh yeah, breathe into his nose, the breath of life, and the man um, was a living soul.
Yeah,
Does that seem good?
yeah. So maybe real quick too, before you jump to 8, we can point out a couple little things here. So the very first word here in verse 7, vayitzer. So this is uh, we don't have to get too nitty gritty into the weeps, but this is a third masculine singular. This is for formed, yatsar being the term to form or to mold, kind of like how a potter would mold clay. So this tells you immediately, to your point that we were talking about earlier, Peyton. God is hands in the dirt, molding things. Um, and so this is very clearly anthropomorphic or anthropomorphizing the creation. This is very clearly not out of nothing, ex nihilo, but this is ex materia here. So there's a couple interesting things that could be said there just in that first word. Um, and you'll notice also, I do want to point out because this is a term that we'll see often, chaim, and maybe I can highlight it here on the screen for us. Um, if you guys can see that right here, chaim. This is like to denote life or something living. Um, and it takes different forms, just like every other verb or adjective will have different forms that it takes. Um, but yeah, so this is he literally becomes a living soul. Here at the end of verse 7 here, lenefesh chaya. So nefesh is like a soul or person. It denotes personhood, like you're an existing person being. And chaya again, sharing that same root with chaim here, is to denote life, something existing. So living person, living being. I don't know if there's anything else from that verse that you guys want to point out, either you, Peyton, or David, before you offer your translation for verse 8.
Just emphasizing that first word, yatsar, I believe it was, really um, also I notice is used a lot in Jeremiah with regard to pottery. I think it's used in participle like form to kind of stand in for like potters or the pot like the potter's clay. So it's again like we talked about very explicitly like in the dirt, like hands-on kind of creation and continually used here and another scripture to refer to how God created humanity. Definitely not ex nihilo or anything close to it.
Yeah, and on top of that as well, two things I wanted to add was one, Genesis. I mean, obviously, the account was not given ex nihilo either, right? It was given in context in the ancient Near East. And if you compare this story with Israelites' neighbors, you'll actually find in a lot of stories outside of Israel, kind of like myths of what is called the washing of the mouth, which is really interesting. So basically, when a statue or an idol was crafted, they would do this sort of ritual where they were like ritualistically like breathing into it, symbolizing like giving it like enlivening it, right? Giving it the deity's presence. And so in Genesis 2, when God breathes into man the breath of life, man becomes this cult image, this representation and manifestation of the presence of deity, which I think is just super powerful, right? So that's
Yeah,
super cool.
I like that a lot. I think that also riffs really well off of Genesis 1 and 26, 27 and 5, 3. I think the editor who's putting these texts together is really aware that these creation texts both share that common theme of where humanity is in the Tselem and Demut of God. And like you said, in Genesis 2, man is pretty much the divine image of God in an idol sense. And I just think that's really fascinating.
Yeah. I'll also add to like there's a fun little wordplay going on here as well, so that you don't really get to unless you know Hebrew. So where the Lord God formed man, which is Adam, out of the dust from the ground, Adamah, right? He's forming Adam out of the Adamah, right? So it's not just like a delightful like wordplay, right? We have a God who inspired scripture, who just loves like word plays and literary aspects. I just really love that. So
Yeah, so if you wanted like a really like literal translation in the sense of like literary characteristics, you could be like, and God formed a groundling out of the ground.
Yeah. Yeah, it adds a lot of sort of depth to the discussion here that isn't immediately apparent, especially for us non-native speakers. It's going to go right over your head. And actually, the Adam and Adama was one of the first things I learned about a few years ago when I first started picking up uh, a Hebrew textbook and got into reading. Um, there's a lot of interesting things like that, and we're actually going to see another really cool play on words here as we transition from chapter 2 to chapter 3 in a few minutes, as well. And I'll point that out when we get there. Um, but maybe David, I'll share my screen again, and maybe if you wouldn't mind picking up where we left off here. Actually, why don't we go to let's do like verses 15 through maybe 18-ish. Does that work for you?
Absolutely. Verse 15. And what do you want me to go to?
Yeah, let's do 15 through 18, I guess.
Sounds good. All right. Starting at verse 15, we have Vayekach Adonai Elohim et ha'adam vayenech nehe nahu. Well, that's a long word. Began ed we got Eden le'avda we got sam ule samra is 15, and so that is and the Lord God took the man and put or placed him in the Garden of Eden to till it or work it and keep it. Or, yeah, keep it is good.
So this is and maybe we can talk a bit more about this in a minute after you've read through the other verses, David. But I do want to highlight here as we're reading. So Gan means garden, and Eden obviously is Eden. But you'll notice at the very end here, verse 15, we get these two terms, La'avda and Ulshamra. And this is the cal infinitive form, the third feminine singular forms of avad and shamar. And so um, we'll talk a bit more about that in a minute, but I wanted to point those out just real quick because this is our first real um, sort of textual clue that Adam is playing, or the man rather, is playing a very specific function or role in the Garden of Eden. And we'll talk more about that in a second. And I want to let David have his turn. So, David, wherever you want to pick up verse, what, 16?
Yeah, sounds good. All right, we have Vayetzev Adonai Elohim al ha'adam lemor mikol et hagan akol tokal. And so that would be, and the Lord God commanded, and this is PL, so it's like intensely, like this is actual, like it's kind of a forcible command. The man saying, and this is what God says, from every tree of the garden you may eat freely. And so that's what he says. Now at verse 17, Ume'et ada'at tov ara lo tokal mimenu
Yeah, Mimenu.
ki mimenu. That's a fun one. Ki we got beyon. Nice. Kal Ka Mimenu. There's it again. Mot Tamut. Oh, this is really interesting. So we have so I'll render this vav is a conjunctive vav, not a consecutive vav, right? So it's not and, it's but from the tree of knowledge um, of good and evil, you shall not eat. Right? This is a command. It's the same like word that's used in the Ten Commandments, right? Thou shalt not do this.
Yeah.
Lo is a negation. From it, for in the day, so that is again yom with a preposition beth, which is in, at, by, or with. Here it's in the day. So in this 24-hour period, in the day, you eat of it, mot tamut, which is literally die, you die. But this construction here is a paronomastic infinitive. All that means is just like it's super intense. It's a syntax construction in Hebrew, which denotes like a surety or a definity of something, right? So the King James
Yeah.
says, you shall surely die. You will definitely die. You're absolutely gonna die. My favorite is you're gonna die, right? So you're gonna die until you're dead, is what my dad might say. So
Yeah, it's an absolute sense. It's like you will die the death.
exactly,
Yeah,
right.
I like that.
Yeah, it
Okay,
looks
good.
like that.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it looks like that also gets carried over in the Septuagint, where it's translated as "tanato apotana tan este." It's like death, you will die.
It's pretty
Yeah, you
intense.
guys would know. You guys would know that way better than I do. I don't. My Greek is atrocious. So,
I need more
uh,
Yeah.
practice.
I mean, yeah, your listeners, if you're considering going into biblical languages, start with Hebrew, definitely. Or maybe if you start with Greek, maybe Hebrew would be like so much easier. So I don't know. They're both fun, but Hebrew is based. So
It's a better
okay.
start.
Yeah.
it's like a rite of passage.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, and I'll finish off real quick with the verse 18. Vayomer Adonai Elohim Lo Tov Hayit Hayot Ha'adam Levado um E'esher. Ooh, that's fun. Lo Itzer Kenigdo. Oh, this is another such a good verse here. So we have our classic Viomer, which if you begin to learn Hebrew, you're going to just get this pounded into your head. It's on page 21 of the Concise Hebrew Aramaic Lexicon of the Old Testament. I memorized the page number, so you see this all the time. Um, so this is again sort of back to Vav consecutives. Um, and the Lord God said, it is not good. Lo tov, right? So you can say that to your friends. Lo tov, dude, right? Lo tov. It is not good. Um, the man, or that the man should be alone, for him to be alone. That's kind of funky. Um, I will make him, or I will make for him a helper, or I personally like counterpart. Partner fit for him. So that phrase is ezer cognito. It literally translates to like and like opposite of him. So she's like him, but she's kind of like his opposite. I like counterpart, right? Because it's like counter, but your partner, right? Is like I kind of like that word. Um, so powerful. We can talk more about that, but yeah.
Yeah, and just to kind of summarize, I think the next couple verses. So we have the man is created before the animals here. We have animals are brought to him as they're made, and just like the man, they're made from sort of the dust of the earth, the ground, the dirt, soil, um, and they're brought before Adam, uh, or the man. I keep doing that, but I should say the man. Um, and and God is trying to find a suitable helpmeet or a counterpart for him, and these animals just aren't doing it. And so, from uh, from that experience, they realize these aren't working. So they decide we need to try something else. So the Lord God and David, you keep using Adonai. I use Yahweh. I there's as we're reading, you'll notice we'll be reading different words, but it means the same thing. Um, so Yahweh basically takes from the man's side and fashions or builds or constructs a woman. And so I'll take the next couple verses. I'm going to skip down here though. I'm going to go to I think let's go to verse 21, I think. Um, and then I think what I'll do is I'll read maybe 21, 22, and 23. And then maybe Peyton, if you want to take 24 and 25, something like that. Um, so we're gonna find out kind of what happens, and maybe there'll be a couple interesting things to mention as we go. Um, so this is verse 21 for those at home, right here where I'm highlighting. So this is Vayapel Yahweh Elohim uh Tardema al Adam Vayishan Vayichach Achat Mitzal Otai Vayishgor Basar uh, Tachtena. So this first term here, Vayapel. So it's like, Adonai, Yahweh, Elohim caused to fall. Um, uh, so he basically causes the man to fall asleep. This is like a deep sleep. So it's that tardema, and then al hadam upon the man. And then Vayishan, and he slept. This is the imperfect third masculine singular for the man. Vayichach, and he took. So this is again with Adonai as the subject here. He took achat, one, mishalotal, one of his ribs. So this is one of the man's ribs, and he closed it up. He closed up the flesh. Basar is flesh or meat, in other contexts, but the flesh in its place, tachtena. Um, yeah, how'd I do?
Oh, great.
So verse 22, this is Vayiben Yahweh Elohim et Haselah, Hatselah, and that Selah there is the rib, or the side. And there's a lot of discussion between scholars of how that should be translated, if it should be rib or side or something else. But I think for our purposes, we'll just say the rib. So Hatselah, Asher, and so this term Asher we see often, which means that or which. Lachach. So this is the Cal Perfect third masculine singular. So God took or had taken. So this is like past tense. What he had done. Min ha'adam la isha. So he took the rib from the man and made it into a woman, la isha. Uh, uh, Vayibea beha. So this is not a furtive comments. So this is Vaivea beha. I did it again. El Ha'adam. So, and he, with Yahweh as the subject, he brought her to the man. So, all this time we've been calling the man Adam or Adam, the man or mankind. Now that we have the rib or the side taken from him and constructed into a woman, um, we'll see in future chapters as we move forward. We'll see the woman serves as the counterpart, and the term Isha comes from Ish, which means man. It's just the general term. And so we'll see that moving forward throughout the Hebrew Bible, Ish and Isha. So that was one of those sort of word plays that we were talking about, David, that we get here even in the early chapters. Um, and then I'll finish off with 23 and then kick it over to Peyton for 24 and 25. So this is 23. It says, Vayomer Hadam. So, and said the man. So, and the man said, Zot Hapaam Etsem Me Atsamai. So this is, so now Zot is like this. Um, so now this is bone of my bones. Um, and then moving forward, it says uvasar and flesh, mi mib shari of my flesh or from my flesh. So bone of my bones and flesh from my flesh. The zot, yichare, yikare, um, and kara is to call or to name. So yichare, this is the nifal form, the imperfect third masculine singular. So this is um, she shall be called or she will be called. Isha, woman, ki meish, because out of man or from man, uh, lukoha, right? Yeah, lukoha zot. This one was taken, something like that. And I think our audience pretty well knows by now that all three of us here are still learners. We don't claim to be experts by any means, but we're going to do our best to read through the text, even if that means you get to hear us mess up a little bit. Maybe that's even a little helpful for people at home to see us kind of stumble a little bit and work through it.
I'm living proof that anyone can learn Hebrew. If you just have some time, you can do it.
Yeah, I
But
put myself in that camp as well.
no, but that translation at the end of 23 was good. The Lukak, the Lukak,
Hmm.
ha. I can't remember how to pronounce it, but that's a call passive participle. So was taken is would
Yeah.
be
Was it
really good for that.
Lukacha? Yeah.
Lukaha. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Something like that.
And listeners might be wondering why on earth there's a definite article attached to Pa'am, which is like at last. This article is functioning as like a demonstrative article,
Yeah,
kind of
so
like
that's right
this.
here. Oop, right there.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
this is functioning like as almost like an emphatic, like it's literally like this, the at last, or like I think idiomatically it would be like finally, or like this is the time, right? At last I have found a counterpart, someone who is actually my Ezer Kenito, right? So it's just a breath of relief that you can kind of feel here. It's finally. So
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. Um, yeah, Peyton, you want to take 24 and 25?
Yeah. Do you want me to translate them and read them and then translate them
Yeah, sure.
both? Okay. So Alken Ya'azav Ish et Aviv ve'et imo v'davak beishto v'ha- v'hayu levasar achat echad. Yeah. And then 25 ve'yicheu Shenehem Arumim Ha'adam Ve'ishto Velo Yat Yatbo Shashu. Okay. 24. So the way I translate that is, therefore a man will leave his father and his mother and cling to his wife, and um, essentially they will become as one flesh, or just one flesh. Yeah, one flesh. Then the next verse, 25. Um, so and they should um okay. I think it's and okay, and the man and his wife were both naked, and they were not um, ashamed.
Yeah, cool. Anything you guys want to talk about in verse 24 or 25?
I noticed about 24, it's interesting how it talks about the man leaving his father and mother and clinging to his wife, because when I hear about how like the Israelite familial structure worked, normally the woman leaves the father and the mother and comes to the man. So what this text might be doing is maybe talking about something more social, where, I mean, physically they're probably still near the father's uh, like the man's mother and father, but in the act of marriage or becoming one flesh, they're socially distinguishing themselves from their ancestors, and um, kind of starting to work out things on their own, even if they're physically near them. Um, yeah, that's what I have for 24. Any thoughts on 25?
In 25, the very last term there, um, Yetbo Shashu, is really interesting because the stem is actually hit polel, which is quite rare. It's the reflexive form of the polel stem, which is like an intensive reflexive, if I'm remembering my stems correctly. Um, and so it's not like they just weren't ashamed, they were just chill with it. They were totally not ashamed like at all, neither of them. So they were chilling.
Yeah, they were completely like ignorant of uh they're not self-aware, or like they weren't self-conscious at all. They were just freely living how they wanted without any sort of uh not even an inkling of shame or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
probably.
another,
Go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna say probably conveyed primarily just innocence and ignorance, just very, very childlike in the sense of like smaller children would often be naked or depicted as naked in art. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. So I do want to point out a couple things here. Let's see. So in verse 25, um we have this term arumim. So this is for with reference to the man and ve'ishto, his woman, and they are naked, arumim. Um, so this is just a adjective, masculine plural, arumim, and it means naked here. Um, Now, remember for just a moment that chapters and verses were not a thing in the time that these texts are being written, redacted, edited, finalized, I guess, if you want to use that term. Um, Verses, chapter distinctions, these came much, much later. And the reason I'm saying that is because in chapter 3 here, as we move on to verse 1, we're going to see this term arumim in a slightly different form, uh, have a slightly different connotation, but there's another play on words going on here. Um, so let's see. David, you're next, right? Do you want to take maybe the first 3 verses or so of chapter 3?
Thing.
Cool.
All right. So chapter 3, verse 1, we have Vahanash, Aya, Arum, there's that word, Arum, Mikol, Hayat, Asde, Asher, Asa, Adonai, Elohim, Vayomer, El Haisha, Af Ki Amer, Elohim, Lo Tok Tokelov,
Toklu.
Mikol Toklu, thank you. Um, Mikol Etz Hagan. So that would be, um, and, or I guess that would be now, or finally, or something. The servant or the serpent uh, was subtle. I guess more subtle because this is comparison here. Um, and this is arum, which is the masculine singular form of arumim, which we just saw, right? Naked. But here it's arum singular with a sense of like subtle or crafty. That's what I think the King James goes with. Um, then any creature or other creature of the field or of the wild that the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, there's Haish, um, did God say, this is kind of probably a question, did God say you shall not eat of any tree from the garden? So this is an interesting question here. So verse 2, you have Hatomer Aisha El Anachas Mipori et Argan Nokal. And so we have, and the woman said, so the woman's replying to the serpent, um, the of the fruit of all the trees or any tree of the garden, so that's a construct state right there, construct chain, we can eat. And now next, this is a dependent verse. So in verse 3, I'll end off here. It says, Umi peri ha'etz asher betok hagan amar Elohim lo tokalu nimenu velo higao bo pen. We got temut temuton. That's
Yeah,
what that is.
Temutun. Yeah.
Temutun. And so that will be another conjunctive but of the fruit of the tree, which so or that, which is article, I believe, that is, or which is in the middle of or in the midst of the garden. God said, you shall not eat from it. Now, this is the weird part. Um, we got the Tov Togaru, which is neither shall you touch it. Um, and then last part, lest you die. So that's rather interesting that Eve lops on there this additional thing there. And right, and contextually, I do not believe that Eve actually existed when God gave that command to Adam, right? She was created afterwards. So did she mishear something? Is she deliberately structuring, like one rabbi said, like a fence around God's command to make sure to not break it? I'm not really sure. So
Yeah, but no, that's interesting though that you point that out. That I don't think she was present for that. This is something that she must have heard. It implied, you know, that she must have heard it from the man, um, but we don't really know. Yeah, this part here, the tigau, uh, to touch it. Um, so kind of going back through those three verses here, I want to maybe point out just a couple things. Um, so we have the Nachash. This is the serpent, Han-Nachash, the serpent. Um, and it says right here in the very beginning of verse 1, Vehanachash haya arum michol hayat hasadeh asher asa Yahweh Elohim. So this is the serpent was Arum. And again, David, as you pointed out, this is the singular form of Arumim, which we saw at the end of chapter 2. The man and his wife are Arumim, they're naked. Well, the serpent here seems to be more naked. There's an interesting play on words here, and there is some scholarship and discussion going on about what this means, what it implies. Um, just looking here at the language here, this term here, Michol, this is the term that's being used to compare. So Michol, this is kol achal, this is every or all. But when you put that mem in front of it, and this is very clearly conjoining the min, so this is from every, or in other words, comparing. This is more than, right? So the serpent is more naked than all the living things in the field that Yahweh Elohim had made. And again, going back to chapter 2, there's other terms for creation besides just bara. What we see in chapter 1, we saw yatsar already, and we saw asa. Here, that term is again asa. Um, so, out of everything that the Lord made in this world of his, the Nachash is the most naked. Um, and I think you mentioned that it's the KJV that translates it as like crafty or something. We might say like he's the most crafty, or maybe wise isn't quite the right word, but like
cunning,
um yeah,
cunning.
cunning. I think I
Mm.
think that works really well. Um, so there's this interesting wordplay going on here that the man and his woman were cunning and were not ashamed, but the Nachash, the serpent, was more cunning. And we see that play out through the narrative, right, in chapter 3, even just in those couple verses you read. One other thing I want to point out too is the term Nachash, here translated as serpent. Um, in other contexts, not just in the Hebrew Bible, but also elsewhere, uh, Nachash is also kind of like uh, it's a term that's used with relation to divination, to divine something. If we think of like, um, is it Samuel? When we get the Witch of Endor uh, bit there, so you have folks who are well trained in the mystic arts, so to speak, right? They're they're diviners. They're able to speak to the dead. They're able to speak to the spirits in the divine council or whatever. They're sort of able to divine their way through, receiving information from the other world, right? Um, so by naming the serpent Nahash, um, it's narratively accomplishing two things. On the surface level, this is a serpent, and the serpent's very cunning, very smart, even more so than the man and his woman. But also, the serpent is a diviner. There's something about the Nahash that enables him to access some sort of information or otherworldly power or connection. Um, and we get this even through just the general sense because he's speaking. He's speaking to the man and his wife. And so he's able to do things that other animals can't do. Um, so there's a lot of interesting wordplay there. But even if we think about this from a more Christian or Latter day Saint specific mindset, when we think about how this has been interpreted through modern revelation, through the Book of Mormon and other scripture, and even other like pseudepigraphic works and things not canonized in the Hebrew Bible, the serpent plays a function as a divine sort of entity, a divine being of sorts. And he knows information about things that no other animal would really know. Um, and so we look at that through our Latter Day Saint lens as well. This can very be easily interpreted as either an agent of Satan or Satan himself, sort of represented as a serpent in this story, which makes sense even if we don't have that explicitly laid out here in Genesis, just from what we see the serpent doing. So I found that interesting. I wanted to just kind of share a little bit about that before we move on. Um, let's see. Is it my turn?
I think so.
I think it's my turn. Um, so we're in verse 4. So I'll do let's see. I'll do verses 4 and 5. And let's see. This is starting in verse 4. Vayomer Hanachash. So and the serpent said, El Haisha, to the woman, Lo Mot Temutun. So you will not die the death. And now that you point that out, I just want to say die the death. That sounds way cooler. But you will not surely die. You will not die the death. And then verse 5, Ki Yodea Elohim, Ki Bayom Achalchem Mimenu. So this is, so key is like an affirmative or whatever. It's like, so for, and Yodea is like a, what would you call it? It's, so Yada'a or Da'a is like knowledge, right? So Yodea would be like, um, Yodea Elohim, so God knows. Ki Bayom, in that day, so like in the very day, I'll call him, that you, second masculine plural, speaking to both the man and his woman, in the day that you both eat of it, mimenu. Let's see, another fun long word. Venif kechu, venif kechu. So then will be opened, enechem, your eyes. Then Vihitem, and you will be Kelohim, like God. Yodea, Yodei Tov Vara, knowing good and evil. Um, so I want to highlight this term here for Elohim just a few words ago, towards the end of verse 5 here. We have and I'll highlight it. Um, excuse me. So right here, we have the kaf in front of Elohim. So this is the preposition like or as or in accordance with, attached to the term Elohim. And so when it does that, it takes on uh, the sort of the vowel shifts over to the preposition here. So you don't say ke Elohim, it's just ke Elohim, right? So it's absorbing that um, the vowel sound that you would make at the beginning of Elohim. So and then so you will be like God, knowing good, tov, vara, and evil. Um, why don't we skip ahead a little bit? So verse 6 and 7. I'll just kind of summarize. So the woman saw that the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil was it was delicious to eat. It was pleasant to look at. Which is interesting because that means that she's making a judgment call, a value call. Um, so there's something that could be said there. I don't think we need to spend any real time on it tonight, but just for those at home thinking about that, like, okay, so she has some sort of agency going on here in the garden. She's able to understand the difference between things, such that she's able to distinguish a value between them. Right? There are certain trees in the garden that maybe produce fruit that are not as pleasant to look at or as delicious to eat. This one, this is the bee's knees. Um, so take that for what you will. There's something there to chew on. But she ate of the fruit. She gave to her husband also. He ate with her, and their eyes were opened. This is verse 7. So their eyes were opened, and the two of them, Shenehem, so them two, and they knew that they were Arumim. Uh-oh. Now they know they're naked. Their nakedness, they see it. And they sewed fig leaves together to make coverings for themselves. So that takes us kind of through the end of chapter of verse 7 there. The next few verses are God himself is walking through the garden. Another anthropomorphic feature, right? He's actually walking, and the man and his woman hear God walking in the garden. They're frightened, and so they hide themselves. And then we have sort of this exchange going on here, where they're kind of relaying what happened. If we just kind of summarize, maybe we can summarize like verses 14 through 15. If one of you guys want to just kind of give a brief summary of what's going on there, because now we have the man and his woman are found out, right? They ate from the fruit. They realize their nakedness. They see God or hear God walking in the garden. They hide themselves. They have their exchange. And now this is kind of what transpires from that point with like verse 14 or 15 onwards. If one of you guys want to kind of take a brief summary of that, and then we'll actually finish our reading tonight with verses 20 through 24.
Yeah, sure thing. Which verses would you like me to summarize? I
Why
could
don't you
do
do
that.
like let's do like verses 14 and 15 or 14 through 16 or something like that. Those couple of verses
Okay.
there.
Yeah. So these verses are really interesting to me, because they're the so-called curses on the serpent, the man, and the woman. Although I did a little bit of study on this, and the language is just really interesting to me. Just what exactly God is cursing or
Yeah, if
who
you
he's
if you
cursing,
want
I
to point out a couple
suppose.
of those things, you know, Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. So the word he used for cursing, I believe, is anar, and that's found specifically in the curse to the serpent in verse 14, but then also in verse 17, but not on the man, but on the ground. And so we're seeing that God is definitely cursing the serpent because he's the main cause of the man and the woman partaking of the fruit of the knowledge of the tree of good and evil. But he's not directly cursing the woman and the man in the later things. Because I'll just read from RSV. Because you have done this, cursed are you, the serpent, among all animals and among all wild creatures. Upon your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. Pretty direct, pretty clear curse on the serpent. And then he talks about putting enmity between you and the woman. But then verse 16, he turns to the woman, and in a much less direct way, he's kind of pronouncing, um, I don't really want to say even a judgment, but just kind of a statement of what reality is going to be like. We're kind of entering this ideological area in the chapter that's describing how things came to be. He's like, because of this, he's not cursing the woman, but he's just saying that he'll increase her pains in childbearing, and in pain she'll bring forth children, and her desire shall be for her husband, and he shall rule over you. And those things are all kind of matter of fact things that are really the state of mortality. It's painful, it's hard, and on a lot of points it's unequal, kind of emphasizing that last bit. Um, and
Yeah.
then
And
only in
if I could point out
17, yeah,
too, if you don't
yeah.
mind, so on that, because this is often in, especially in Christian circles, this whole episode, right, of the fall gets reworked in a lot of sort of Christian history, with like Augustine and so forth, with original sin and so forth. These are all kind of theological. I would call them impositions on the text, but they're definitely theological underpinnings for Christian worldview generally and how they read these things. And I want to highlight what you said, Peyton. This is, as it's read just straight from the text here. Um, this is read as an etiological tale of how things came to be, or just how things in the world work. And so we see that before Adam and Eve partook of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they were totally unashamed. They were unaware of their own nakedness, very childlike and innocent. Now, having partaken of the fruit, they have knowledge of good and evil. And I forget the precise term for this, but this is like an all encompassing. It's not just opposites, like now you know the difference between good and evil. It's like an all encompassing. Now you have knowledge of the world and just how things work, and you're able to distinguish between things. And because of that, it's like the text is basically giving an etiological tale for growing up. You're no longer children anymore. Now your desire is for your husband, and you're going to know him, and you're going to have children. And I'm letting you know that now that you're no longer a child anymore, and now that you're having relations with your husband, you're going to get pregnant, you're going to have children, it's going to be painful. And so it's kind of like you said, it's not really God cursing the woman, like, oh, look how evil you are. You did this terrible, atrocious thing. And now I'm going to curse you that you're going to just have pain and all this stuff, and life's going to be miserable. It's more just read like, hey, you guys are growing up, this is how the world works, and because you're supposed to be together, you're of one flesh, basar echad, which anybody who watched my Shema video earlier this week, I reference uh Genesis 2:24 there to make a rhetorical point. um but because they are now operating as one flesh and they're having children, he's just kind of warning them, hey, this is the price of growing up, and this is what the world is like. Um, and so we also see that with respect to the Nahash, he's cursed to eat the dust of the earth and to essentially slither around on his belly. And this is kind of an ideological tale in a lot of midrash and elsewhere of like, oh, this is basically why snakes slither on their stomach instead of have legs like lizards and stuff.
I was going to ask David, do you have anything to say about this part?
Oh yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. It's not so much the emphasis is not on like Adam and Eve did something wrong, and so we're all punished for their wrongdoing. It's more so that they did something, and that thing is why I have to work for my food, right? Why I have to go out on my farm, and why does it hurt when I give birth, right? It's kind of like explaining why the world is as it is. That's what an etiology is. So I wouldn't put too much weight in like into its like exact historicity and stuff, like going through and stuff. And certainly, you would have people like Augustine, like you said later, who would go through and put some like notion of like inherited guilt based on like a Latin mistranslation of Romans. That's just not at all present here. We're simply suffering the effects of mortality, and that's all that the effects of it really are.
Cool. Um, so let's finish off here and see if we can do this rather quickly. So let's do verses 20 through 24.
Okay. So then verse 20, Vayikra ha'adam Shem im ishto hava ki hiv um, hayita em kal chai. So that's and the man called um, uh, the name of his wife Eve for and for for she is the mother of all living, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. And then 21, Vaya'as Yahweh Elohim le'adam ul ishto ul ishto kat not or vayal vishem. And that one is going to be, and um, the Lord God made for the man and for the woman. Um,
Yeah, and it's Ulish Toe, so it's for his woman. Yeah.
for his woman, thank you. Um, made them, I think this is the simply the garments of skin. So yeah,
Yeah,
and
and
they wore them.
and he clothed him
Yeah, and clothed them.
is how that finishes out there.
Okay.
Vayal Bishem, yeah, and clothed them. This is the I want to say this is Hifil. Um,
Yeah, me too. I can check. Yeah, you're right.
um, but
Hmm.
yeah, so this is imperfect third masculine singular. So this is Adonai clothed them. Um, and then did you want to do 22? And then David can take the last, or yeah, David can take the last two.
Yeah, sure. Vayomer Yahweh Elohim hen ha'adam haya adam mimnu mimenu
Yeah.
lada'at tov vara ve'ata pen ya pen yishlach uh, yado vela kak gam me'etz hahayim ve'akal ve'chai le'olam. Okay. And Yahweh Elohim said, um, um, I'm trying to remember, said, behold, um, the man or mankind, um, has become um, like one, like one of us, uh, to uh, um, to know good and evil, and to know good and evil, and now to know good and evil, lest, okay. Oh wait, yeah, no, and now, lest they stretch, lest he stretch his hand and also take from the tree of life and eat and live forever. Does that sound right?
Yeah, sounds good to me. And for people who the last couple weeks we've been reading with Genesis, we've been reading portions of Moses and Abraham as well. You might have come across the term Nolam in Abraham, I think chapter 3. Um, Shares the same thing here. Olam, which we typically uh, will translate as like forever, but I think more technically means like in perpetuity. Um, but yeah, and then the only other thing I might point out just as we're wrapping up here, um, so Haya ke'echad. So remember that kaf is acting as a preposition here again with echad. So it's ka'achad. So like one mimenu from us. So they become like one of us. And maybe I'll save this more as we move on in other episodes in the future. Um, but it'll probably be necessary at some point to really talk about the difference between perfect and imperfect uh, forms of words. We have this thing in English where it's much more clear that like we're talking about something that's either past tense, present tense, or future tense. Um, Hebrew is a little bit different. You'll still get the same tenses, but it's in different forms, and typically the way they think about it is like something is either a completed action or an incompleted action, which means it's either happened or it's going to happen or will happen or is in the process of happening, um, and it's not yet completed action yet. And so we'll talk about that a little bit, but like this haya in front of ka'achad mimenu. So ha'adam haya, this is a completed action. It's already been done. The man has become like one of us. So that's the only other thing I wanted to point out there, just as a language thing. But yeah, anything from you, David, on that?
I was going to say too, this verse is pretty interesting to note because when we're talking with our Protestant friends, they'll find the like doctrine of exaltation or becoming like God very problematic. And one way that they frame it is in a sense of like this first serpent's lie was that man could become like God. But here, God is actually confirming that particular words of the serpent. So God confirms that man did in fact become like God. So that's not actually problematic in our sense, but that's more apologetic than linguistic. So
Right. That's for
Yeah.
another video, but yeah. Go ahead, Peyton.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, linguistically, I find it very interesting that, like, it's kind of described an aspect of godliness as knowing good and evil, because that's brought back up again in Deutero-Isaiah, where God is speaking polemically to the idols in one of the earlier chapters, somewhere from 40 to 45, I think, where he's criticizing them because they cannot tell good from evil. That's something that the idols lack, kind of like showing that they aren't gods. And so that really like heightens the meaning of the man and woman knowing good and evil. They have that kind of spark of the divine in them that they're able to grow and uh, increase in godliness with God's help.
Yeah. And they're like in other ancient Near Eastern texts as well, like we see this in some Sumerian and Akkadian texts, where the gods fashion humanity to be like them, but also they, through process of time, give gifts of knowledge and tools and things for how to till the earth and take care of the ground and their environment and stuff. And so we get bits and pieces of that here, even in the Genesis account, from an Israelite perspective. But it preserves sort of that idea that there's a spark of the divine with the man and his woman here, very very clearly, I think. Yeah, and then David, if you want to finish this off here, 23 and 24, and then we'll close out so Peyton can get going.
Thing. So we got Vayesalehihu. That's a fun word. Adonai,
Yodelehihu.
Yodlehihu, exactly. Adonai Elohim Megan Eden La'avod et Ha'adama Asher Lukach Misam. And so that is, and he sent him forth, and the Lord God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till Avod, which is actually used within a lot of like tabernacle temple texts to refer to the man's or people's like priestly Levitical temple work. So it can, yes, have an agricultural sense, which it does here, but to anyone who is reading text about the tabernacle, would immediately come to mind that this man is kind of like God's priest, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, and I didn't mention this earlier. I had meant to, but when we were back in chapter 2, when the man was in the Garden of Eden, he was set apart as sort of this priestly figure in the garden. And the terms were used, avad and shamar, which is exactly the term we see here in another form, avod, to till or to work. This comes from avad, which is like to serve. It also like denotes not just general servitude, but also slavery. Um, and so Adam is set apart as this like priest to guard and watch over the garden and also to till it and tend to it and keep it. This is the exact same terms that are used explicitly for the Levitical priests in the Exodus narratives in Leviticus, um, as they're being set apart and given their duties. The Lord explicitly calls them to avad and shamar, to be servants who work, and to shamar, to guard and to keep all things related to the tabernacle and the priestly function of later of the temple and stuff. And so, because of the timing of when these texts were likely written, it seems to be much more clear that the Israelites had in mind that Adam and the man and his woman were officiating in this sort of priestly role. And Eden itself, and this is something that we didn't talk too much about tonight, Eden itself is not just this like wilderness of just a bunch of things growing all over the place, but this is a very well tended and organized, luscious garden, which plays on, and I'm actually writing the script for a video on this in my Why Temples Matter series, of the garden of the gods. The gods dwell in lush, ornate gardens. And so Adam is a priest who officiates in the garden of the gods. And which is why God walks in the garden, and talks with the man in the garden. He is in the presence of the Lord in the Lord's garden, doing priestly things, serving the Lord. And so this is all priestly temple, sacred space connotation. And that's something that I will flesh out a lot more in a future video, because I'm writing a script on that right now. But that is one thing that I wanted to make mention tonight, is those terms, like what you just read, David, with avod, is explicit priestly language given to Adam in Genesis 2, and then again here as he's cast out of the garden. But yeah. And then did you finish 24, or is that
Not yet.
okay?
Yeah, I'll do that real quick. And also, I was going to say that the word for garments, the garments that God gave Adam and Eve, were also the same word that's used for the priestly garments of Aaron and his priests. So yeah, they're just temple stuff everywhere. But
Yeah, the tunics, and then the even like the undergarment or whatever, the whatever you call it.
exactly. And the stones too in like the river that are described earlier in Genesis 2 are also the same stones that are placed inside like the vestments of the breastplate of Aaron. So yeah, so
Yeah.
crazy. But okay, yeah, so I'll finish up then. We got Vegaret et Ha'adam Vayasken Mikedem Legan Eden et HaKarubim cherubim Viet Lachat HaHereb um, HaMithapeket. Ooh, that's a fun one.
Oh yeah.
Lismor et di et direk et Ahayim. And so that is, and he drove out, which is PL, so that's kind of intensive. And he drove the man out, and he placed, that's Hiphil, and he caused him to be placed at the east, which again, the entrance to the Garden of Eden is at the east, which is the same direction that the tabernacle entrance faced, as well as the temple in Jerusalem, right? So this is again more temple imagery. Um, at the east of the Garden of Eden, um, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden the cherubim, which is plural, which is also, again, tabernacle language. So it's just temple stuff everywhere. Um, and the flame of the sword, so the cherubim and the flame of the sword, which,
Yeah, like a sword of flame, basically.
exactly, which, this is kind of funky. Um, I believe is this hit L? I think that's hit L.
Yeah.
Um, that's pretty distinctive there. So that's
Yeah, I
like
had to make a
intensive
note on this
reflexive,
word.
right?
Yeah, it looks like a
Uh
heat pile participle.
yeah.
Oh yeah, hit L participle. Nice. So like which which turned every direction is I don't know. That's kind of difficult.
Yeah, like turned
Or
around
turned
so
everywhere.
I have my notes here and I put whirled or whirling.
Whirl.
So
That's a good one. Yeah, nice.
yeah, so a flaming sword whirling. Um,
Whirling to guard um, the way to, or I guess maybe entrance to the tree of life.
cool. And we see that word again, shamar, with reference to the cheruvim, the cherubim, who are guarding the way of the tree of life in this sacred temple space. They're guarding with a flaming sword, and that word loshmor, or excuse me, lishmor, uh, to guard. This is the vowel, but this is the cal infinitive, and this is the same thing we see with Adam, as I already mentioned. So the just like Adam had this sort of role to guard and keep the Garden of Eden in chapter 2, uh, as he's being expelled from the garden, uh, the cherubim are coming down, and they now take his place to guard the way and keep it. So we have sort of a passing of the guard there, where now the role, the priestly function, the role of guarding the entrance into the holy space or the sacred space is now given to the cherubim. And that's the same imagery we see all over the place the in the tent of meeting, or the tabernacle, and the temple as well, with the cherubim and all that guarding the different entrances to the rooms or um, compartments of the sacred space in the temple and so forth. Cool. Any last words you guys want to say before we head out here?
I just think I learned a whole lot. I hadn't considered as deeply Genesis 2 and 3 as a temple text, and seeing these things pop out has been really useful. I think very surprising and in a great way.
I was gonna say too, as I was studying for this video, there's just so much wonderful, like delightful imagery here that just makes me appreciate the temple more. And so, as I've learned and studied Hebrew and the historical context which for some can seem like menial tasks, right? Figure out to parse the words of parts of speech. There really is like just treasures everywhere. And so I would encourage everyone to if they can, give learning language a shot because I mean, I'm gonna go to the temple next week and have all these things in mind. Yeah, it's just awesome. So thanks again.
Cool. Appreciate it. I'm gonna stop sharing here. Yeah, I just want to say thanks to you guys for being willing to come on and hang out and read some with me. Um, Peyton, I know it's your birthday and you got some big plans, so I'll let you go and get out of here. But happy birthday, Peyton. And for those at home, thanks for sticking with us. If you made it this far, then you're the trooper. Because we've been at it for a while. So I appreciate everybody watching. Thank you guys for joining me, and we'll see you next time.